He called for widespread protests that forced New York to high alarm on Friday between fear, violence. After a violent rally that started around 18 o'clock, he arrested most these people. On one hand, 75 years exploration, profession and violence. On other hand, let us keep future freedom, he said. Rabb the crowd of Brooklyn for a few hundred people. They closed the street for about an hour. Chuck walked to Schumer's house. Then they returned to Grand Army Plaza, where he was sitting in front of the Brooklyn Public Library and was a long Palestine. More than 100 law enforcement force approached activists and officers arrested 58 protesters and turned them into 2 full MTA buses. There was a heavy police on the parking slope on Friday. Spring Ostadan Gothamist in early hours of day. 2 city blocks enough to fill protesters at 14:30 at Times Square. Palestinian supporters filled Broadway pavement between 41st and 42nd Streets. Shook flag and shook flag. Palestine will be free. Signs sold the Palestinian flags for $5 and protesters hired posters to help Israel. Protesters stand on transport container in the city center of Manhattan and shake Palestinian flags. To a divine crowd. Jesse Edwards Gothamist 45-year-old Brooklyn resident Kashif Choudry. Supporters a city that said that number Times Square rally to show solidarity with Palestinian people said that bombing many civilians are trapped Gaza. He said, "It is very bad situation. ASSOC against several dozens of blue-white flags dressed blue. White. Protesters gathered on North Side 42nd Street shouted back forth with supporters on South Side. Who supports Israel? I can't understand that it is possible," said Moger.Protestoists walked to Israeli Consulate on the East Side before continuing United Nations, where they met for a moment before they depart for pro-Israeli demonstrators. A police-assembled pen sadly sat empty. Salma Ibrahim, an 18-year-old Egyptian-American from Bensonhurst, has been in the first protest since the conflict began last week. At least 2 demonstrators were arrested in the Times Square protest, one supporting Palestinians, and the other supports Israel. Protestos came shortly after Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, and Israel officials quickly declared war and series of aggressive opposite according to ASSOCICIATED Press. The war has already resulted in more than 2,100 deaths. On Thursday, Israeli military forces warned that entire population of northern Gaza should be moved to the south. Within 24 hours, United Nations spokesman Stéphane Dujarric's impossible without breaking down humanitarian consequences, Majlis Ash-Surda Dezines and Muslim organizations. A group of umbrellas, including New York Islamic Leadership Council, organized various groups. A protester near Midtown paused.Jessy Edwards Gothamist